Planet Earth, the blue planet. More than 3/4 of the globe is covered by water. And above that lies an ocean of air. And air and water are always in motion, creating global patterns of wind and ocean currents that carry heat round the planet, evening out extreme temperatures. Wind and water make the Earth a comfortable place to live. We experience these movements as weather. But wind and water shape the nature of the whole planet. This wind and water system is powered by the sun, which burns down most fiercely at the equator. The sun's heat warms tropical seas and the air above them. Hot air rises. Tropical seabirds use these lifting air currents as they search the ocean for food. The warm ocean saturates this rising air with moisture. But as the air continues to rise, it cools down, and the water vapor condenses to form clouds. Clouds are made up of tiny droplets of water, so small and light they float in the air, like breath on a cold day. Blown on the wind, these clouds may end up over land, where hills and mountains force them to rise even higher, cooling even more. The droplets of water get bigger, so big they're too heavy to float, and they fall as rain. Lots of rain. At the equator, this potent mixture of heat and rain creates tropical rainforest. Nature runs riot here. Uncountable numbers of different plants and animals. All around the equator, wherever enough rain saturates the land, there is tropical rainforest. In Southeast Asia, the rain is brought by seasonal winds, the monsoons. They come every April and stay until October, drenching the forest and everything in it. And in Australia, the tip of Queensland reaches just far enough north to be part of this tropical rainforest belt. But the greatest rainforest of them all is in South America. The Amazon, the largest river in the world, drains a rainforest that stretches from the Andes to the Atlantic, across almost the entire continent. But even the mighty Amazon can't drain away all the rain that falls in the wet season. The river spills out over the land, and as the world of the forest meets the world of the river, the forest is invaded by fish. But many of the trees here depend on these fish to disperse their seeds. Pacu are giant relatives of piranha, but these fish eat fruit. And as they do, they carry the seeds away from where they fell. To the north, rainforest cloaks much of Central America. For Mayan Indian farmers here, getting enough rain wouldn't seem to be a problem. But it isn't that simple. The right amount of rain must fall at just the right time. Rain is a powerful force of nature, a living entity, a god. The image of the Mayan rain god, Chac, is carved hundreds of times on this temple wall. Rain gods hold the power of life and death. Tlaloc, the rain god of the Aztecs, is still honored today. The Totonac Indians of Mexico go to great lengths to please him. In the hope that he'll water their crops, they perform spectacular rituals. Four men, representing the four directions from which Tlaloc sends the weather, fly to Earth, like the rain itself. The clouds drop all their rain on the tropical rainforests. But the air masses that carried the rain clouds are still rising. They eventually bump into the upper atmosphere and flow away from the equator. 1,000 miles from the equator, they start to descend again, now completely dry and warming up. The hot, dry air sucks the moisture out of the land and creates deserts. All around the globe, either side of the rainforest belt, lie the great deserts of the world: the Gobi, the Namib, the Mojave, the Kalahari. This is a landscape shaped by the wind. In places, the wind exposes the bare bones of the earth itself. In the American Southwest, the vivid colors of the rocks give this place its name, the Painted Desert. But stretching for over 3,000 miles across North Africa is the greatest desert in the world, the Sahara. Nowhere could be more of a contrast to the rainforest. Yet people have also lived here for centuries. Like the wind itself, Tuareg nomads are always on the move, traveling from oasis to oasis, relying on camels for their transport. And camels are the supreme desert creatures. Their splayed feet help them walk on the shifting sands. Life here is a constant battle against the wind. It whips up the sand into vicious sandstorms that tear across the desert. Camels can cope with the sand. They have long eyelashes to protect their eyes. But people have to protect themselves as best they can. Desert life seems harsh, but in most deserts of the world, there's enough precious water for life to keep a hold. It's just a matter of living with the heat and dust. But there's one desert in the American West where it seems nothing should be able to live. Death Valley. A valley whose floor is 250 feet below sea level, where it reaches 125 degrees in the shade. Where occasional flows of water just evaporate, leaving beds of salt. Yet there is water here. In just a few places, water wells up from underground springs. And one of the few creatures really at home here is the least expected, a fish. The Death Valley pupfish. It's found only in these isolated pools. This is the whole universe for a pupfish. For the deserts around this searing valley, spring and summer bring thunderstorms that hold the promise of rain. And sometimes the promise is fulfilled. There's an explosion of life. As the rain soaks in, the desert is painted with new colors. Desert annuals grow and flower in a matter of weeks. The sinking air that creates the deserts hasn't yet finished its journey. It blows back along the Earth's surface towards the equator as constant, steady winds. But these winds are twisted by the rotation of the Earth, So they blow towards the equator from the eastern side of the ocean. Blowing over warm seas once again, the winds pick up moisture. These winds are so reliable, they were exploited by merchants and explorers on their long journeys. The crews gave them their name, the trade winds. Albatrosses also ride the trade winds for thousands of miles around the Pacific. Sailing across the Pacific could take months. This ocean covers half the globe. Plenty of time for the trade winds to gather all the moisture they can hold. But dotted throughout the Pacific are islands, tiny specks of land in the vastness of the ocean. And where these islands lie in the path of the trade winds, once again, the air is forced upwards, cools, and the moisture is turned into rain clouds. This is Hawaii, an island chain with peaks reaching 14,000 feet out of the ocean. When the trade winds meet such huge mountains, they release their moisture. On the windward side of the islands, the northeast, there's so much rain, it creates rainforest. And the same winds that bring the rain brought life to the islands. These fruit flies are all descended from one ancestor that arrived here on the wind. Because the islands are so isolated, evolution had a field day. The fruit flies evolved into 600 different species, all exclusive to Hawaii. They each have their own distinctive patterns and their own style of fighting. The islands of Hawaii are also a battleground between bigger forces, between wind and water, and earth and fire. Hawaii was created by volcanoes, and the big island, the island of Hawaii itself, is still very much alive. The volcano of Kilauea pours lava into the sea, creating enormous plumes of deadly hydrochloric acid as it reacts with the seawater. This is the largest single volcano on the planet. And the big island is still growing. Earth and fire overcoming the forces of wind and water as the island rises out of the sea. To the native people of Hawaii, the lava from the volcano is created by a goddess, unpredictable, moody, temperamental, the fire goddess, Pele. They still perform elaborate ceremonies to Pele around the crater of Kilauea. Big Island wasn't Pele's first home. She used to live on another island, Kauai, at the opposite end of the Hawaiian chain. Today, though, Kauai is an island not of fire, but of water. The native Hawaiians understood the conflict between earth and fire and wind and water. It was a battle between two goddesses, Pele and her sister Namaka, the goddess of the sea. And eventually, Pele was driven away from Kauai by her sister. This island is an extinct volcano. It was created by Pele, but once she left, the island succumbed to the power of water. Like all Hawaiian islands, Kauai is in the path of the moist trade winds. 40 feet of rain falls here each year on the central mountains, making this one of the wettest places on Earth. Without Pele's presence, it's now being eaten away, eroded by wind and water into dramatic landscapes. These razor-edged cliffs of the Nepali coast reach up 3,000 feet from the sea. And as the island is slowly returned to Namaka, the sea goddess, it'll become like the islands further along the chain. Once a huge volcanic mountain, Midway Island is a small, flat dot of land in the middle of the ocean. And now it belongs to the albatrosses. In the path of the winds and eaten away by the sea, Midway Island is disappearing below the waves. Albatrosses come here because it is so flat. They might be graceful in the air, but not so elegant when it comes to landing. They come here to nest. This is the only time that these birds of the wind will touch land. Albatrosses are the spirit of wind and water, the ghosts of sailors lost at sea. As they leave Midway behind and soar on the ocean winds, they're flying over a chain of sea mounts, ancient Hawaiian islands that have been eroded far below the surface, completely reclaimed by Namaka. This hidden island chain stretches over half the Pacific. The winds that blow over this vast ocean push the water into huge waves. as the winds move over the sea, they do more than just produce waves. They drive the surface water of the oceans into huge circulating currents. The most famous, and the first to be mapped, is in the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf Stream, a current of warm water flowing northwards along the east coast of America. John Cabot, the explorer, was amongst the first to encounter this great current. His crew kept their beer in the bottom of the hold to keep it cold. But sailing across the Atlantic, they found, to their dismay, their beer had turned sour. They'd crossed into the warm waters of the Gulf Stream. Ships from Europe that sailed west on the trade winds could ride the Gulf Stream east to go home. Warm water that begins its journey in the Gulf of Mexico sweeps past Florida at 5 miles per hour. Hitching a ride on the Gulf Stream could save 2 weeks on the return journey from the Americas to Europe. But humans aren't alone in riding the Gulf Stream. This floating seaweed, sargassum, is the only plant that actually migrates. Rafts of this seaweed drift on the circulating currents of the Atlantic. And living within these rafts of sargassum are an assortment of bizarre creatures. Disguised to look like the seaweed, toadfish, sea slugs, crabs have all adopted the same color scheme. The toadfish uses its disguise to stalk the seaweed for smaller fish. Big ocean predators like dolphinfish, dorado, come here for the same reason. Hordes of small fish shelter in these rafts. Sargassum rafts might be the only place to hide in the open sea, but that doesn't guarantee safety. The sargassum weed and its passengers just drift round and round the circulating Atlantic currents. But as the warm Gulf Stream sweeps further north, it meets the cold Labrador Current off the eastern coast of Canada, and the different waters swirl and mix together. In the shallow waters of the Grand Banks, the mixing currents churn up nutrients from the seabed. The result is fertile water that supports huge numbers of fish. Capelin thrive in these waters. In the summer, millions of them throw themselves onto the beach to spawn, to leave their eggs out of reach of ocean predators. Many of them will be stranded and die, but many others will escape back into the water, probably to become food for larger fish or seabirds. There was a time when these were some of the biggest seabird colonies in the world, but their numbers were decimated by those first sailors and fishermen who slaughtered them as food for their return journey to Europe. A few colonies remain, like this gannet colony in Newfoundland, still supported by the rich seas of the Grand Banks. Just as the warm and cold currents meet here, so too do warm and cold air masses. And when warm air blows over cold water, it produces fog. The northwest Atlantic, off the coast of Newfoundland, is notorious for its huge fog banks. And when warm air meets cold air, the cold air forces the warm air to rise, creating banks of rain clouds, a storm system, an Atlantic depression. These storms then track eastwards across the Atlantic towards Europe. The most westerly tip of Europe is Ireland, and the Irish coast bears the brunt of many of the violent storms and gales that cross the Atlantic. These storms can bring very high winds. In 1987, one particularly severe depression generated a storm which took the British Isles completely by surprise. On October the 15th, wind and rain swept across the country. A day of heavy rain would be followed by a night of disaster. Not even the weather forecasters knew what was about to hit Britain. Winds were recorded at over 110 miles per hour. The terrible aftermath was revealed next morning. 15 million trees had been flattened in the worst storm since 1703. 19 people died, and the English counties of Sussex, Kent, and Surrey were devastated. But although the British Isles are battered by storms, they're usually free of bitterly cold weather or heavy snow. The warm waters of the Gulf Stream also cross the North Atlantic. It keeps Western Europe much warmer than other places that are just as far north. As the Gulf Stream brushes the western coast of Ireland, it creates conditions found nowhere else in Northern Europe. The ancient oak forests of Killarney are damp and warm. Trees, boulders, logs, everything is covered in brilliant emerald moss. It's just right for a creature that only otherwise lives in southern Europe, the Kerry spotted slug. This slug is here simply because of the Gulf Stream. The huge sweep of tropical water keeps Killarney warm enough for the slugs to flourish within just a few square miles. But it's never long before the next Atlantic storm arrives, because storms are steered in this direction by currents of air high in the atmosphere. Clouds, rain, storms, wind, all our weather as we know it takes place in the lower part of the atmosphere. But rise above these clouds, and the atmosphere is very different. Instead of the turmoil of storm clouds, there are narrow, fast streams of wind blowing at over 180 miles per hour, the jet streams. Just as the ancient sailing ships rode the trade winds, modern airliners use the jet streams to speed up their journeys. Because of the rotation of the Earth, the jet streams blow towards the east. Flying from America to Europe takes an hour less than flying from Europe to America. The North American continent is bounded by two great ocean currents. As the warm Gulf Stream flows north up the east coast, the west coast is brushed by the cold California current flowing south. The current churns up nutrients from the seabed, turning the sea off the California coast into a kaleidoscope of marine life. In this cold water, sea otters dive for food, shellfish, through huge forests of kelp. Kelp reaches all the way from the seabed to the surface, sometimes as much as 200 feet. To do so, it can grow up to 2 feet a day. For a sea otter, finding food in these rich waters is easy. The hard part is cracking an abalone's shell against a stone that's balanced precariously on its chest in a rough sea. Sometimes sea otters have company for dinner. Cormorants seem to know that sea otters might disturb fish as they search around for their own food. The cold water supports the forests of giant kelp in the sea, but it also supports forests of giant trees on the land. Cool, temperate rainforests of massive pines, firs, spruces, and redwoods. As warm, moist air from the open ocean blows over the cold water near the coast, it produces fog and rain, enough water to maintain these rainforests along a narrow strip of coast from California to Alaska. The cold California current also makes it possible to harness the wind. Away from the coast, California is hot and dry. The sun heats the ground during the morning, which warms the air above it, and gradually this warm air starts to rise. Cold air flows in from the coast to replace it, and by midday, a constant westerly wind is blowing. This wind, funneled through the Altamont Valley near San Francisco, is steady, reliable, predictable, which makes this the perfect place for over 3,000 windmills. It's hard to imagine the power of the winds that blow over the face of the earth. But even a gentle breeze can provide enough energy to power an entire city. But there's one place where the wind rarely blows. Round the equator, there's a belt of sea where the air is deadly calm. The doldrums. Sailing ships trying to cross the equator could be stranded here for weeks in sweltering, humid conditions, sending the crew insane. On the edge of the doldrums, the warm sea causes the air above it to rise quickly, sucking more air in behind it. Sometimes, as this whole system starts to spin, a monster is born. A tropical depression, a huge rotating storm, bringing strong winds, torrential rain, and thunderstorms.
Today, August 17th, the first tropical storm of the 1992 season, Tropical Storm Andrew, is developing in the East Atlantic. It's currently tracking due west and is expected to turn to the northwest within 24 hours.
The Caribbean takes the brunt of many of the storms that are born in the Atlantic. And until the last few decades, there was little warning of their arrival. The only clue came from the birds. Native people noticed that sooty terns, nesting on beaches, would suddenly abandon their colonies. And if they did, people guessed a storm was on its way. All over the Caribbean and Central America, a tropical storm was a powerful, living being. The Mayan god of strong winds was Hunrakan. The Spanish conquerors gave his name to the most violent form of tropical storm, the hurricane.
As from today, August 22nd, Tropical Storm Andrew is upgraded to a hurricane. It is now tracking directly west and gaining strength. A hurricane watch is posted for the northwest Bahamas from Andrew
A hurricane,
to Eleuthera Island.
the most powerful force on the planet, given life by the warm tropical ocean. Hundreds of miles across, the winds are strongest at the center, around the eye.
The east coast of Florida has now been upgraded. A hurricane warning is in force for the southeast coast of Florida.
A hurricane can bring winds that blow at well over 100 miles an hour, and it'll hit with the equivalent power of 20 nuclear explosions every hour.
Sunday, August 23rd. Hurricane Andrew is now a Category 4 hurricane and has reached the North Bahamas. Wind speeds of 150 miles per hour have been measured, and a storm surge is estimated at 16 feet.
It will devastate everything in its path. On the evening of Saturday, August the 23rd, 1992, the Hurricane Watch, posted for Florida's west coast, was stepped up to a hurricane warning. Along with the birds, the people had just one option: evacuate. On Sunday the 24th, over 1 million people abandoned South Florida and headed north to safety. At 3 a.m. on the morning of the 25th, Hurricane Andrew slammed into the coast just south of Miami. Andrew cut a swathe of destruction 30 miles wide across South Florida, with sustained winds of 145 miles per hour. Its trail of devastation was unbelievable. In cash terms, this was the most destructive hurricane in the history of the United States. There were 350,000 homes in Andrew's path. The town of Homestead was completely destroyed.
Hurricane Andrew has passed over the southern half of Florida and into the Gulf of Mexico, where it's now heading for the coast of Louisiana. It's now a Category 3 hurricane, and a hurricane warning is still in place for the northern Gulf Coast.
Over land, cut off from the warm ocean, a hurricane dies in a last flurry of thunderstorms. But over the flat plains of the central United States, the moving warm air mass collides with a cold air mass moving down from the north. This can produce violent, spinning vortices. And when one of these vortices touches the ground, it creates a monster that's dangerous, unpredictable, and personal. A tornado. A finger of chaos reaches down to the earth and annihilates everything it touches. In a matter of minutes, our world of order and stability is swept away, and there's nothing we can do about it. The strongest tornado can pack as much energy as a hurricane. But whereas a hurricane is hundreds of miles across, a tornado is concentrated in a much smaller area, a matter of hundreds of feet. We only notice the forces of wind and water when they create havoc. But these storms are the safety valves in the wind and water system, releasing excess energy. They're part of the smooth running of our world. Without the breath of the wind and the flow of water, the planet would be unrecognizable. There'd be no life on planet Earth. Perhaps a better name for our home world would be Planet Water.